Yesterday, literally yesterday, February 25th, 2026, the USDA dropped their annual food price forecast. Buried in the middle of it, very casually, eggs were up 34% year over year as recently as January, after hitting $8 a dozen at the worst point last year. $8 for 12 eggs. Meanwhile, this morning, I walked out to my property here in Mexico, reached under a hen who was generally offended about it, gave me full side eye, serious personal offense taken, and collected eggs for free, technically, that are so nutritionally different from what you get at the store that they don't even look the same. I need to talk about this, not just the egg prices, though we are absolutely going to talk about that, and it will make you appropriately furious about the whole thing. What it means to grow your own food, what it costs you emotionally, and what it gives you back. Because I cried over an egg once, a real, actual, full cry. And it was one of the best moments of my life. Let me tell you the whole story. Let's start with what's actually happening because I want you to have a real information before I editorialize, which I absolutely will be doing. Since 2022, the United States has experienced the industry politely calls highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreaks, blah, blah, blah. What that means in practice is 166 million birds. Get that again. 166 million birds have been slaughtered, not died, slaughtered, depopulated. When a single bird tests positive in a facility, the entire flock is killed. Every single one. 166 million birds. Let me put that in perspective for you guys. Let's say one person has, I don't know, the monkeypox. Okay, this is just, I'm throwing it out there. But we need to eradicate the whole flock of humans because one person has monkeypox. Yeah, do you see the reality of that? Yeah, it doesn't work. Let me sit with the last one for a second. The largest egg producer in the country, in the US, posted an 82% revenue jump during the period when Americans were rationing eggs and stores were limiting purchases to 2 cartons per customer. The Department of Justice has opened an investigation. Cal Maine says they're operating. How generous of them. Now, here's where it gets interesting from a tinfoil hat wearing connect the dots perspective. Who benefits from 166 million birds being gone? Who benefits from egg production being centralized in massive industrial facilities instead of distributed across millions of small backyard flocks? The same companies reporting record revenue during the crisis. Funny how that works every single time. I'm not saying bird flu isn't real. I'm just saying, when 166 million birds get killed and the response is to rebuild the same centralized industrial system that made the whole situation possible, and the companies that own that system profit enormously, we are allowed to ask questions. We are actually required to ask questions. And one of the best questions you can ask is, what if I just had my own damn chickens? Now, story time. I'm warning you right now, this story has joy and heartbreak and absurdity and a rooster named Negro. And at least 2 moments where you might tear up, and I'm not apologizing for any of it. When I first started building my chicken flock at my previous property that I was renting, I did what any completely reasonable person does when they decide they want chickens. I hatched them from eggs in an incubator, which is either the most wholesome thing you've ever heard of or the beginning of a very educational nightmare, depending on how it goes. Out of the 30 eggs that I purchased that were quote-unquote purebred Rhode Island Reds, which I've talked about, I hatched 14 chicks. 14 little fluffy dinosaurs that I watched crack out of their shells and stumble around, and I was besotted. I was done. I was a chicken person. There's no going back. I mean, yes, I did grow up with 300 chickens on our hobby farm on Vancouver Island, but it's totally different when you as an adult and you're doing this by yourself and on your own little farmstead and not on your family farm, which I've done previously. Anyway, I digress. So they start growing and then they start crowing. So out of my 14 chicks that I hatched, 8 of those buggers were roosters. 8. And the statistical probability of this is apparently not as rare as you hope, which is something I wish someone had mentioned before I named them all and got emotionally attached. Well, I did and I didn't, but Now, If you don't know what happens when you have 8 roosters and a small flock of hens, let me paint you a picture. Chaos, absolute unhinged chaos. Roosters fighting, roosters chasing the hens relentlessly, roosters performing their morning concert one at a time, starting at 3 a.m. I would describe as a genuinely ungodly hour every single day without exception. So I had to cull them. And for those of you who don't know what that means in practice, it means I had to kill and process my own roosters, the one I hatched, the ones I named, the ones I watched peck out of their little shells. And I want to be honest about this because the sanitized version of homesteading that gets presented online does a real disservice to people trying to actually build this life. It's not always beautiful. It's not always content worthy. Sometimes it's standing in your yard with a specific task and a lot of complicated feelings about it. 7-ish roosters in the freezer. And yes, it was not pleasant at first. And yes, I also eat them and still have some left and eating them. And both of these things are true and okay at the time. And just on a side note, I did ask a local friend of mine who is male to help do the deed, and I talked about it in a previous episode. So I didn't actually have to do the slicey dicey part of the original from unaliving part. Yeah, I didn't have to do that. I'll get there one day. But that being said, again, I have 3 drakes that I've talked about, the 3 tenors, and I'm waiting for my daddy to come down next month to help me with the tenors. Anyway, back to this story. So I kept Negro. Negro was actually not from my hatched chickens, but Negro was gifted to me by a lady, him and his sister. I just called her Blackie. They were gifted to me as chicklets. They were just a couple days old because I gave her a ride home in the last village I lived in. She gifted me chicks. And I was like over the moon. So Negro, I watched him grow, and he was, I don't know how to explain this without sounding like a full-on crazy chicken lady, which fair, I completely am. Negro was special. He was gorgeous. I mean, he was a good rooster. He was a late bloomer, and he actually took his time to become a full-on man, you know what I'm saying? The other roosters that I personally hatched, they were like Rhode Island Red mixed with something white, I think. Anyway, they were like super rooster growth really fast, and they developed really fast. And he was still finding his feet, and he was older than them. Anyway, so he was a really good rooster. And the only problem with him is he had absolutely no jump. Like this black boy could not jump, I'm telling you. So a few weeks before I moved to the current property, literally, called them, put them in the freezer, big transition energy, bittersweet, the way real life transitions are. And then we moved here. My new land, new beginning, fresh start on the coast of Mexico with my whole flock, including my magnificent rooster Negro. And a few weeks after we arrived, Negro was taken and his sister Blackie by a coyote or something, I don't know. And I've mentioned him before in this podcast, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt. You raise animals from eggs, they become part of your daily landscape, and then losing them is a real loss, apart from the fact that he was ginormous and gorgeous. Anyway, so full stop. But here's what I want you to really hear about homesteading. Knowing the purpose of your animals doesn't make the grief less real. It just makes it more honest. And I knew why I had roosters. I knew their role, and I still grieved Negro. And that grief was not a contradiction. That grief was just love. And then last week, I hatched his babies. Yes, Negro's babies, his genetics, his little nuggets, his little fur bums are running around in their little, I actually have a baby playpen that I bought just for raising chickens. And now because we saved his eggs, I hatched 11 of his babies, and they're only his babies, even though 6 of them were black and 5 of them are yellow with who knows what color. But they hatched, and we did it. And I'm really happy because I'm pretty sure I got NJ, which is Negro Jr., in there. He's a very big little chick. Homesteading is the longest game you will ever play. It is grief and joy and ridiculous comedy and profound satisfaction all happening at the same time. Like, I don't know, can you hear the chicken clucking in the far distance? Yes, just another one laid an egg this morning. So it is even putting 7 roosters in the freezer and choking up a little bit about it, and then hatching a dead rooster's babies and understanding deeply that this is how life actually works, and you're a genuine part of it. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I got my first egg. So let me tell you about the first egg. You have to understand what goes on in getting getting there. You hatch the chicks, you feed them, you water them, you worry about them, you lose some, you treat their pasty butts when they're babies. And then the real thing, look it up. It's as unglamorous as it sounds. And you watch them grow from tiny, fluffy chaos creatures into actual hens with actual attitudes and actual very strong opinions about everything. My hens are free range, fully free range, which sounds lovely, and it is lovely, except what it also means is getting them into the coop at night is a daily negotiation with animals that have zero interest in my schedule or my preferences or the perfectly good shelter that I built for them to save them from the coyotes that took their rooster and their big sister. They go where they want. They eat what they want. They scratch up frickin' everything in reach. And then they sleep wherever they decide to sleep. And sometimes, often, not the coop. But what that freedom gives them and what that scratching and foraging and eating bugs and greens and whatever they find in the actual living soil gives them shows up in the eggs. When I cracked my first homestead egg, my own egg from my own chicken that I hatched and raised on my property, the yolk was orange. Not yellow, orange, orange. Deep, almost glowing, the color of the yolk that comes from a genuinely healthy bird living a genuinely real life. And I stood in my kitchen and I cried. Not a sad crying, not even like happy crying exactly. The kind of crying that actually happens when something connects you that you didn't know was disconnected. When you hold something you actually made that required your time and care and grief and learning multiple roosters in a freezer, and it's real. Genuinely, actually real. And I cried because I knew what was in that egg. And I cried because I knew what was not in it. No crowded cage, no industrial fed with ingredients you need a chemistry degree to understand, no factory farm where a bird never sees sunlight, no supply chain, no Cal-Maine executive's bonus, and no $8 price tag. Just a chicken who scratched around in the dirt all day, ate bugs, and lived like a chicken is supposed to, and gave me the most honest, nutritionally real egg I haven't seen since I lived back in Canada and my own family farm fresh eggs. So the actual nutritional breakdown, because I want you to be able to hold your ground with facts in any conversation about this. Yolk color is a direct indicator of carotenoid content. Xanthophilus lutein, zeaxanthin. I know, these are like antioxidant compounds found in the plants and insects your chickens actually eat. And those are big words. I know, I was having a problem reading them. But anyway, the pale yellow yolk tells you that the bird ate processed grain in a facility and was really not a happy bird. An orange yolk tells you the bird ate real food in a real environment. Side note, there are ways that the elitist class has pumped things into chickens to make eggs look orangey yolk. That's a whole other topic. But genuinely, the yolk color indicates a healthy or unhealthy raised bird. So, studies comparing pasture-raised birds to commercial cage eggs consistently find pasture-raised eggs contain up to twice the omega-3 fatty acids, up to 3 times more vitamin E, up to 4 times more vitamin D, and significantly higher levels of vitamins A and B. These are not marginal differences. These are balanced. These are differences that show up in immune function, brain health, inflammation levels, and hormone regulation. And this is before we even talk about what is in commercial eggs that isn't in mine. Industrial laying hens are routinely fed diets that include antibiotics to manage disease in the overcrowded conditions they're kept in. And in some operations, ingredients that you would set the carton down very slowly and back away. My hens eat bugs, grass, kitchen scraps. I even get scraps from the grocery store for vegetables that look perfectly fine, but are bent or, a little dirty. Like yesterday, I brought it home 2 bags of groceries that were just throwaways from the grocery store, from the veggies. And this is what they eat. And whatever they find in the soil that hasn't seen industrial chemicals freely in sunlight on actual ground, right? Food as medicine is not a cute wellness phrase. It is a literal description of what food is. I mean, the quality of what you eat is directly upstream from the quality of your health. There is no supplements that replace a genuinely nourished egg from a genuinely healthy bird. Grandma knew this. Or great grandma, depends how old you are. She knew it because she could see it in the yolk, and we forget we're remembering. Now, also, side note, I just want you to know I am not the best example sometimes at holistic health and being this perfect guru hippie that is like a stick and has a six pack. I'm not there yet, guys. But what I do know is that I'm on that trajectory and that eggs are freaking awesome. Okay. Back to the segment 5. Now, real talk about actually starting this, because I know some of you are in an apartment listening to me talk about free range hens on a Mexican farmstead thinking, great, Mama Kay, incredibly applicable to my urban studio apartment. Thank you so much. Okay, I hear you. Here is genuinely useful information for wherever you actually are. If you have land, even a small yard, chickens are more accessible than you think. Most municipalities allow backyard flocks to 3 to 6 hens. No rooster required for eggs, by the way, which is a big misconception. Your hens will lay regardless, and your neighbors will not hate you, generally. But then if you have a Karen in the HOA, yeah, sorry about that. So check your local bylaws. Start with 3 or 4 hens, build from there. And my survival starter vault guide has a full beginner chicken guide, link in the notes. Now, if you have no land right now, your investment is in knowledge and relationships. Find local farmers, go to go to farmers markets and actually talk to the people growing the food. Community supported agriculture. It's not just buying better eggs. You're building a relationship with your food system that will matter enormously when the supply chain does what supply chains love to do, which is fail spectacularly right before a major holiday. And start learning. Learn what to look for. Learn what the yolk color means. Learn how chickens are supposed to be raised. Because the day you do have land, even a container garden, even a single pot of herbs, that knowledge is the foundation everything else gets built on. You don't have to have it figured out all today. I sure as heck don't. You just have to start moving in the right direction. Negro's babies are about, there's actually 2 batches, they're about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks old. My free range hens out there right now are doing exactly what they want in complete defiance of the coop I built. And I have eggs for breakfast. This morning, I had a beautiful omelet made by my dear friend who is here right now. And she made mushroom with cheese. Oh, so good. And she made that while I was out working on my garden. Anyway, I digress. So the point is I have eggs for breakfast that cost me nothing except time and care and a learning curve. And yes, I do buy layer pellets, but they don't eat that a lot. Okay, just saying. So in the learning curves that are included putting, roosters in the freezer and not enjoying the process of unaliving them, but that's homesteading. That's the whole beautiful, messy, heartbreaking, completely worth it thing. Okay. So if this episode made you want to Google how to start backyard chickens, do it. That is the correct response. If this episode made you appropriately furious about Cal-Maine Foods and the DOJ investigation that somehow isn't a bigger news story, also correct. Channel it into something you can build. And if this episode made you feel something about a rooster named Negro and his babies hatching here in Mexico, welcome to my life. It is chaotic, loud, and occasionally heartbreaking, and I would not trade it for anything in this world. So next episode is water. Who owns it? What's happening to it? And what you can do at any property size and stop, depending entirely on a system you didn't design and cannot control. It is going to be unhinged. Bring snacks. Share this one with someone who paid $8 for eggs last week and didn't know they had options. They need to hear this. I'm Mama Kay, 1-acre farmstead growing on the coast of Mexico, free-range hens who refuse their perfectly good coop, almost 2-week-old chickens who already have enormous personalities, and my tinfoil hat firmly in place. Stay ready, stay petty, stay winning, and see you next episode.